So you've got the tough part. You have to implement. In academia, we get to talk about what the future looks like and look at all of these cool companies. So Michael was talking about you're tracking a couple of thousand. When we, 4.5 years ago within the Innovation Lab, started looking at real estate tech, before it was even called that, there were a handful. There were a dozen, half a dozen. We know who they were. Now our list is up over 2,200. I think, if we put the list together, it could be 3,000. Either way we look at it, it's a huge number, and we can slice and dice that. And I won't go into all of them, but I have a couple of big themes that we're seeing that we can talk about. One is an idea that we refer to as real estate fracking. So we know what oil and gas fracking is, but real estate fracking is taking the use of the asset, breaking it up into smaller pieces and reconfiguring it in higher value combinations, just like taking oil out of the ground. It's really unlocking the value. So principal examples, everybody's heard of WeWork and everybody's heard of Airbnb. Airbnb, the largest hotel company in the world, doesn't have any beds. So these are ways that the assets being used and the values being unlocked. So co-working. Principal example. We've heard all about it. You guys have looked at it, and we're in a co-working space. What's happening though is that, in the case of co-working, there's a 2 to 6x return versus the lease rate. So this is a good business to be in, depending upon which building you're in, which city you're in. But what's happening now is co-working is taking on its own versions and varieties. So there's a co-working for biotech called biolabs. There's industrious, which is kind of upscale co-working. There are a bunch of, there's one called CyberTech out in San Diego that's all about cybersecurity. We were discussing, Danny and I were discussing Work Bar, which is sort of a suburban solution in the New England area, but they're also putting co-working inside of Staples stores. So now that's interesting, right? That's kind of a double frack. What does Staples have? They got a lot of real estate. And so they're monetizing vacant real estate within the big box using co-working, which is also optimizing and monetizing. So this idea of real estate fracking, though, is jumping into the other food groups. So there's, and you probably know some of them, there's Liquid Space for empty meeting rooms. There was Pivot Desk for empty cubicles. That's now been bought by Industrious. Clutter for anybody here in self-storage? Involved with self-storage. Clutter is optimizing self-storage. So they pick up my stuff, I don't know where it gets stored. It gets stored at the cheapest place around town. They're using, and this is all enabled by technology. We get to this because it's enabled by technology. So you've got a pier here and storefront for retail, for pop-up retail. Anybody do hotel work? Hotel work? Interesting one called Y Hotel. Some guys from Vornado, maybe? Yeah, Y Hotel. They come in and do a pop-up hotel during lease-up in the apartment building, and then they're out. So during lease-up, you've got all that real estate that sits empty, not generating any cash flow, and they'll go in and solve that problem for you. I think the takeaway from this is to really understand that the startups, many of them, are looking at where is the asset not being used optimally. And then they're applying technology, and they're unlocking the value in ways that the traditional business models haven't necessarily acknowledged or recognized. One last one. Ever heard of this one called Recharge? Have you heard of Recharge?
Yeah.
Recharge in New York. It's hotel rooms by the minute. Okay, the jokes almost write themselves, right? He's in New Yorker, that's why he was laughing. Okay, hotel rooms by the minute. Okay, we laugh at this. But the thing is, I don't know how much you might know how much traction they're getting. But they've got the Pierre and some W's and some Hyatts, and so that 2 hours in the afternoon sits empty and not generating any cash flow. So this is the kind of thinking that's going on. It's the Zipcaring or the Ubering or the Airbnb-ing of real estate. Something to keep in mind. So that's one kind of theme that we're seeing. The other is the UI and the UX of real estate, user interface or the user experience of real estate. Those of you who are tech people, UI, the user interface. There's a great quote from Chris Kelly from a company called Convene, which we could talk about. You guys know Chris. What talent wants, landlords need, and developers must build. What talent wants, landlord needs, and developers must build. That's a broad statement about turning the equation completely upside down. In the past, developers build, and we hope that the users are happy with it. That's simplifying it. But really the user is getting much more power in the equation. and the technology is enabling it. You've probably heard about them. There are a bunch of different crowdsourcing methods and beacons, and they're tracking us everywhere we go to understand how we use, and I'm going to want to hear how you guys are doing it, because I know that you're doing it through the 360 platform, and you've probably looked at all of the companies I could list. But this user interface, user experience is becoming so important to attract and keep talent. And the last thing I might add, the last big theme is that real estate is getting smarter. We could talk a whole hour about this, but that includes artificial intelligence. It includes augmented reality, virtual reality, includes blockchain. But try to cut through the hype and the noise on blockchain. Just the key takeaway on blockchain, the blockchain is to transactions what the internet was to information. The blockchain is to transactions what the internet was to information. You'll never do the blockchain. You'll use something that sits on top of the blockchain and it'll blow your doors off. But the same way we never had to do the internet. We just work, we live with all the stuff that sits on top of it. So those are three kind of big themes. Does that give you something to work with?
Yeah, no, it definitely does.
So tell us how's it happening in reality? Because in academia, we have the luxury of just, kind of pontificating and theorizing and researching and predicting the future. And if we're wrong, whatever.
Yeah.
It matters for you.
So Steve and his team, kind of write the articles and set the media around kind of everything that can be done. And then guys like me get to catch it and have a conversation with the client about it and talk about it. Okay, so how can we actually do that? And so one thing I will say, kind of when you talk about the amount of CREtech companies that are out there, what I've been so joyous to have, kind of entities like Michael's come to the scene and talk about is how do you guys begin segmenting the marketplace of all that it is CRE technology. We're running a CRM system which has about 5,000 companies in it, all of whom are sitting at some roads at the intersection of real estate and technology and are coming to people like myself and others in the company and pitching a product that will change the way not just we do business, but a client's, or at least they're telling us will change the way that we do business and a client's. However, the reality is, and one of my commitments to Michael is that I would share with you, we're managing real estate portfolios for about 90% of the Fortune 100. When I look at the Fortune 250 and the clients that we're having conversations with, I would break it down into really how they define innovation within their real estate team to probably give you the best, the best way to think about real estate technology for them. And for about 20% of them, when they define innovation, it's really just getting all of their properties into a single Excel file. And that's the reality of today. And that cannot be underscored in terms of when you're talking about kind of an uphill challenge for adaption. You're talking about, I just want all the properties in one Excel file. About 60% of our clients, I would say, come to people like me and say, we want innovation, we want innovation. And we say, how do you define innovation? And it's either an, I don't know, or it's a, I heard something about blockchain from Steve over at MIT, and I'd like to know about it. And so it's really kind of crafting a conversation with them to find out what really is, kind of a driving challenge for them right now. And I would say at the forefront, what we're seeing is the tools that can provide you better transparency and a dashboard to the operations, and then things that are providing immediate value add, obviously easiest to document there in terms of energy savings. And then our final 20% of that Fortune 250, I would say, is really representing an enterprise business from tech media, telecom, kind of really enterprises pointed towards providing this technology. And they're saying, why are we just selling this to the marketplace? Why aren't we turning it inward and using it to enhance our own work experience? And so this is where you're having clients actually come to us and saying, we've built this app, we've built this workflow management tool. We've got an idea to help drive data-driven FM. And these are, kind of in my world, these are the ideal clients, but at the same time, the hard clients, because then it erases the ability for us to create kind of this universal language or universal platform that I think everyone is dying for, but it does drive us forward. The best thing that we can have as a company is others out there who are in front of us who are kind of pulling us forward. But that's it. That's my 20-60-20 of how the Fortune 250 is really operating. That's kind of the percentage of where I see them. I think the biggest thing to realize too for those in the room who have a product or who have a need in terms of understanding what this marketplace looks like is also how the clients see the marketplace. And I'd say there's two major categories of what I would consider smart building that all of this comes together into. And there's your operationally smart, and then there's your experientially smart. In the operational smart buildings, this is kind of the bread and butter, tried and true, the last 25 years of building automation systems are all focused towards building into the operational category. And that's where you're empowering the FMs, you're controlling building equipment, and you're reducing your resource expenditure. And over the last really probably 18 months, I think a lot of that has been turned on its head, and through trends just in tech offices, the capabilities of iPhones, services, obviously kind of the Uberification of everything, you've got this transition now where so many more of our clients are coming to us and wanting experientially smart, and that's where you're shifting to empowering the occupant, controlling their environment and kind of curating their day, and reducing distractions for them and letting them do their work. So I'm hopeful that kind of helps, kind of who's out there and what they're doing, and then also in terms of what they're doing, kind of two major categories. But I'm now supposed to ask Steve a question.
You are.
And,
Wait, I have a question about this last one. So the UI or UX that I mentioned, so there are a couple of different versions. There's the user, there's the interface of maybe the owner and the operator with the physical building.
Yeah.
There's then the version where they interact in kind of a one-way version with the tenants. Mm-hmm. But then we've also got this great crowdsourced, we've got certain solutions that are now crowdsourced, so it comes back to us. So it's actually a three, and maybe there are four different, it's a multifaceted experience in the UI and the UX.
Definitely. Some of the coolest stuff, all of the IoT, where people are saying, this is peel and stick, or you just download an app and it's $3 a month. A lot of that is enabling us to do kind of one-way data flow. And one-way data flow is great in terms of, kind of the seamless driver knows exactly what desk you're sitting in and can deliver your food to your desk instead of the door. But what really gets, I don't want to give an exact number, but X factor more expensive is the two-way data flow, where we're actually having to either hardwire or do some type of secure Wi-Fi into the building systems, and that's where we can control the building. And that's where you can say, I'm too hot, unhappy face, unhappy face. I was joking with Turner earlier, and beginning to control the building systems. And I think that's where, kind of the real value is. And when I look at what comes next for real estate technology, it's driving that cost down in the commercial space, where what we're seeing with things like Nest in the home and residential markets become so cheap and so easy to adapt. We're still waiting for that really kind of that real page turn, the new chapter for some of the pricing that's out there on the hardware side.
So the equation is harder, I would imagine, on this user experience and your retention of talent. That's very hard to quantify. But on the energy side and the operation side, you must actually be able to do a cost benefit, and you can model that.
Yeah. There is not a contract that we execute without being able to show a client an ROI in this space. One of my commitments, I just took a new role with the company about 60 days ago, to clients, is that every dollar you spend with me, you get $1 back or more, based on what we implement on your portfolio. And
Michael has that policy.
Yeah. Except he doesn't pay. So yeah. But this is all, if you set up the roadmap to smart correctly, we can really kind of do this in a way that enables you to do some pretty cool things with sensors and occupancy management in your portfolio. Measure and know truly how you're using the space, being able to identify the areas that have lower utilization, scale them off, spin them out, and whether it's at a lease term or it is mid-lease term, you got to make the finances work, but be able to reinvest those savings and really make what you have less a greater experience for the occupants, smarter for the actual operations, and at the end of the day, go after what I call the triple bottom line of people, profit, and planet, in terms of what technology is able to do for real estate.
Are you doing that with homegrown solutions, or are you road testing outside startup solutions?
Yeah.
Anything you can share?
Yeah, we have a methodology of build, blend build, buy, or partner. And it just depends on kind of what we're going after. We as a company, know the future of real estate is the idea of digital twins, and kind of moving into kind of this virtual physical. It all becomes one, and so we're investing heavily in the space, and that means different speeds in terms of the products will dictate that decision. And then different complexities, and kind of we will be the first to tell you, some things are better built outside the company, but then some are better built inside the company, especially when you look at kind of the valuations that are getting placed, and it just becomes cost prohibitive of us to not build.
Right. Anybody using Anybody using beacons in your workplace, or do you know that there are beacons in your workplace? Anybody tracking? What are you doing?
Well, so I think we're an exception. We actually build.
Oh, he does that.
Yeah.
You're not allowed to answer. No, really, what are you doing with it? What are you doing with it?
For us, so we use beacons on iPhones and iPads to basically help visitors sign in faster, so they can tap once to sign in
Yeah.
when visiting an office.
Anybody tracking Wi-Fi traffic? Yeah?
Somewhat.
How-
Retail space.
Yeah. Are you doing it yourself or through an app or?
We've actually been testing different technologies over time and have not landed on one that we
Yeah.
found would work us.
Yeah, so that you can optimize use?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
So
how
there's-
far down the road do you want me to go?
I don't know. Were you supposed to ask me a question? I don't want to we're going to get in trouble if we,
All right,
if we go off scripts, but we can.
Steve, what are some of the cutting edge things that MIT is working on?
Oh, yeah. Well, we do, this isn't quite as sexy. Actually, it is. Who's from the capital side? Who's from the money side? Well, I mean, we're all from the money side. Okay, so there's a long history of asset pricing. And so we build these incredibly complex models. And the big model that we're doing in New York now has, I was told, 1,900 variables rather than the usual 40 that you might have that won't bog down an Excel spreadsheet. Now, the reason this is interesting is not only from the valuation standpoint, but because of where the data is coming from. We're getting data. I sometimes wonder if all of these startups are really in the data business. They just don't know it yet.
Yeah.
They're all data companies, and some of them do or don't know it. But we have access to immense amounts of data that we never had access before. It's either getting unlocked, we couldn't get to it, or it's completely new data. So when we mentioned crowdsourcing, so if we're using these devices to get feedback from the users, that data was really hard to get before, and now we can get lots of it, and it's more accurate and it's consistent. So one of the things we're working on these incredibly complex asset pricing models. The other thing we're doing is we're tracking where innovation takes place, why it takes place, why these clusters form. We're tracking this globally, why they form, and what that means for real estate. The reason it matters for us is because it matters to real estate. Where's the labor going to be? Where are the startups going to be? Where are the companies of the future going to be? And so we're mapping where these clusters are and trying to understand why it happens in those places. Atlanta has a lot of the elements in place, primarily great workforce, but you've also got Georgia Tech and others that are an anchor to this kind of percolating, creative, entrepreneurial, and technology activity. So those are a couple of the neat things. We're also doing some work on AR and VR. We'll talk about that in a moment.
Yeah. I mean, so if you look at kind of cutting edge, for us, yeah, we've bought a couple companies in the AR, VR space. I think, has anyone here seen our Floored technology? And we just released a tool called Spacer. We've done some machine learning in terms of lease administration. We're running the same with blockchain. The reality for us is, it's a tremendous benefit to have the global platform that we do. But we are realizing as well, as you look at all these technologies, you cannot replace the value of a face-to-face conversation, a human interaction, and being able to say that, this is, a number 2, 3 expense for my company, in terms of my real estate, budget. And, this is important. I still have, full and immaculate trust in a human being. But all of that underwriting, all of the back end, all of the, behind the scenes work is, ripe for some type of automation and the records and driving the data that makes the next decision better than the last. And so that's really kind of where we're looking at.
I mean, we're doing some, MIT broadly has a big initiative for AI and machine learning. And so I think that's a good point. I often get a question when I'm out talking, brokers especially raise a hand. And by the way, I'm a recovering broker, so I know I've been in your seat. But raise their hand and say, am I out of a job? And if you read Rise of the Robots, you'll be on the ledge and we'll be talking you off the ledge. But if you read Second Machine Age, which also talks about this, it's a little more optimistic about what the future looks like. But I do have a story about a guy named Paul English, who was the founder of Kayak. And Paul was there when he and a couple of other companies completely destroyed the travel agency business, completely wiped it out. So he took his hundreds of millions after the big buyout and did a bunch of charitable work, and 10 years go by, and now he's back and he's just announced his new startup. So what do you think it is? It's a travel agency. It's a travel agency, except it's different. It's high margin, high touch, boutique, exotic, not always most expensive, but he's re-entering a business that he helped to completely upend. And so I think what's intriguing about all of these startups, and we know only a fraction of them will make it, but this is definitely a structural change to how the business works. But think of all of the things you do on a day-to-day basis that are an annoyance, that are no margin, that you do it to keep the client happy, that distract you from doing the stuff that's high margin, high value added. That's what a lot of this stuff will be able to do. There will be some things that will be disruptive. I can't promise it's going to be smooth sailing, but many of them are going to take a lot of this stuff off your plate. And that's to your point, that kind of the stuff that's running in the background, if I heard you correctly,
Yeah.
that sucks time and money and attention, and we can do those better, faster, cheaper.
Yeah, I mean, it's a classic quantity versus quality, and kind of what you're doing in quantity will automate, and what you're doing, kind of in the quality, kind of will stay with the human. We made I won't call it a mistake. We had Andrew McAfee come and speak to some of our clients, and he's the author of the books that Steve just spoke to.
He's the author of Second Machine Age, and then he and Eric have a couple of other ones. I forget who did Rise of the Robots. I needed a Valium when I was done with it.
Yeah.
It was bad.
Yeah, well, I needed 450 of them for the clients we had them speak to.
Oh, yeah.
But it will.
He's somewhat provocative.
Yeah. It definitely kind of changes your opinion on what that road is ahead. But I would say this, kind of my guidance here. Mike, how much time do we have?
What do you want?
Hey, you're keeping a tight timetable here. It's got to come back to simplicity. And so, kind of, I always tell, kind of my team, kind of our goal, my personal goal is to make what we do invisible. And so I think a lot of people say, like, we gotta do this, and it's got to be kind of right in front of them, kind of smacking them in the face, or they're not going to adopt it. Kind of, if we do this well in terms of the technology that goes into the buildings, it's going to be invisible. It's going to be something that's seamless and just flows. Everything, kind of over the last couple of years has been, kind of hardwired, added on, meshed. You got to download, like, just, kind of, troublesome, like 19 decision points to get it to actually operate, cleanly. If we can make this invisible, if we can make it secure, if we can make it trusted, where it's just operating and it's flowing off of what I would estimate is somewhere between 450 sensors which walked into this room with the number of devices we all know have, and the ability to draw off of the sensors in the room to say, it's a little hot, and we're going to lower the temperature. And all those sensors just left that room, so we can now turn off the lights, and we can turn that air conditioning back up and lower the utility bill for that room. That's the type of stuff where kind of I personally think is going to drive so much change in the industry. What I'm seeing right now in terms of the far out there, like the blockchain conversations, they're just automating a process that's really kind of already automated. We'll get kind of some incremental gains there, but unless we radically reapply it, it's got to be something that really changes our day-to-day interactions in the space, where I think people are going to grab onto it and say, that's where we're going next.
We're also really early in the cycle.
It
doesn't feel like it, because we started following it 4.5 years ago. You were kind of 6 years out.
Yeah.
But we're still very early. There have been a few mergers. There've been a few, Hightower and BTS. There was a merger. There've been some acquisitions. There've been some companies not getting funded. There's still a lot of VC coming into the space, and so I think we're early on.
Oh yeah, in the
We're-
CREtech space, yeah, definitely early on.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we're early on, and so there's still a lot to be sorted out. But we'll get there. So with that, dude, how do we do? How do we
Can I
do?
jump in?
Yeah, you
Yeah.
want to jump in, Michael?
So just 2 questions, one for each of you guys, but brilliant, by the way, thank you. So Steve, for you, coming from MIT, coming from Boston, there's a real ecosystem of CREtech up there,
Right.
clearly. There are startups that are probably all the time. There's VCs up there that are investing locally. What advice for you could you give Atlanta, because there's such an amazing university system structure down here. Got a young man from Georgia Tech who came out, wants to start a CREtech community within the school. What advice could you give Atlanta, coming from your perspective? Like, how do you build a CREtech community ecosystem here? And then I'll shut up. And then
Do you have-
Matt, just
do you
for
have an hour?
I have
It's
to
okay.
throw the one question at you, which is the one that I get all the time. And we had a whole conference on it in LA, driverless cars. So we have to talk about that. So
How come I don't get the driverless
you
car?
get the tough one.
Question. I think you have a lot of elements. You've got the educational anchor, you've got a very robust real estate business, you've got startups, a bunch of examples right out here. I actually went through our database to see, and there is activity in real estate tech already, and there's definitely activity in tech broadly. I'm going to see Tech Square tomorrow at Georgia Tech. So I think a lot of it is here, and you also are landing these huge companies are relocating here, and they've all got innovation initiatives. They've got heads of innovation. They've got heads of digital. I think all of the pieces are here, and I wish I had more days to really find out more about it. Because wouldn't you agree? I mean, there's already a lot of activity, a lot of tech activity already here. So I think it's getting the real estate people together with the tech people, and either through venues like, channels like this, or other opportunities to get people, and especially if Georgia Tech, who's visiting from, did we meet?
There he is.
Is he back there?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, oh, there, yeah, sorry. So, yeah, so I think you could take the lead, because that's all we did. We just said, we're already in this space. Let's get the real estate people in the room with the tech people, and tremendous things happen. And so now we're even opening up a private co-working space is opening that will just be for real estate. Now, it'll be real estate tech and real estate people. Small shops, get the real estate people to hang out with the tech people and see what comes out of it. So that's, and I'm glad to discuss it further later.
That's helpful, that's why we're here.
Yeah. So
You got the easy, this is so
I know.
easy.
So I do
It's not easy.
So I do a 60-minute talk on autonomous vehicles usually, but I'm going to try and put it into 2 minutes here. Just, I think, last week, we crossed the line of 50 separate companies testing autonomous vehicles in California alone. And so that shows you the extent of the ecosystem there. You are looking at an industry that is just, kind of the phenomenal kind of explosive growth, because of the value add that can come out of it when we all don't own and drive our own car is tremendous. And you've seen it with, kind of obviously kind of the Ubers, where the price drops immediately in half. I think the, kind of the metrics behind when we all, turn over to autonomous Ubers is it's basically 1/10 of the cost of transportation that it is today. And so for the people in this room, just by the fact of, kind of, I'm looking around, seeing about 75% of you in sport coats, kind of, we are a wealth, kind of in this room that is not, thankfully having to probably make the decision of, does the 9/10 that's devoted to my car right now need to go away? But for a large swath of not just America, but the world, to be able to lose 90% of your transportation budget and return it to something else is tremendous. And so there is, really at this point, I would say the technology is there. They are driving fully autonomous, level 5, no human or steering wheel cars in mines in both Sweden and China. Kind of they are doing it in cities like small test cities in Michigan and California. It's really kind of the regulations, and I would say probably like the last 8% safety barrier, where things like the plastic bag blowing on the road still isn't recorded into the machine learning calculations to be able to know whether that car needs to avoid it or not. But within really I think 3 to 4 years, we're liable to see kind of the fully autonomous, like a Tesla's level 3. Level 5 is it doesn't even have the steering wheel. I mean, I think it's within 10 years we'll have no steering wheels. Within 5 years it will be pretty much every car manufacturer out there has their autonomous vehicle on the road. That begins radically transforming the kind of when you're thinking I move from point A to point B and where I live and where I work, and that's an investment of time. That's no longer an investment of time. You're able to do something completely else. So people start shifting what makes sense in terms of where they live and where they work. And I think it's just going to radically reform a lot of expectations of its location. That begins kind of going away when you don't have to really, when you value that commute time differently. We're seeing that same automation inside of facilities. It's been growing fastest inside of industrial supply chains. And when those robots inside the building are now matching the speeds of the robots working outside the building at just the same, kind of going in the same lockstep, I mean, that begins changing just one industry at a time, and things start, kind of falling like dominoes. So we'll see. I don't by any means think it's going to be like overnight change, but I do think within kind of 15 years, it will be, kind of very odd to think that, we drive cars today. I have a daughter. She's 18 months old. I don't think she's going to drive cars. I think she's going to look at driving in cars the way I look at my parents smoking and be like, what were they thinking? I mean, if you think about it, driving your car is the most dangerous thing you do on a daily basis. And so this technology is now available to, kind of get that out of your life. And, again, it's just, you're going down the highway, you're driving your car, and an autonomous car goes past you, and the guy's in the back seat working away or watching a movie. Things start shifting, I think, faster than you would think, and your ability to say, I love my car, I wouldn't give this up. You start saying, I would love to not have to pay attention right now. But Steve,